Now, if you really want to get the most out of Photoshop, you also have to look at the color settings as well as the preference settings. So let's take a look at what the color settings are. And to do that, we come up to Edit and then come down to Color Settings. And you'll see this big dialog box come up. And it's very, very straightforward. And this is the default settings. I purposely reset it so you'd see what to expect when you open this panel for the first time. Now, I'm going to direct your attention over here to the working spaces. And the first thing you have to change is this right here. You want to go to the Pro Photo RGB color space and keep it there. Never take it off. The CMYK is less important. If you anticipate doing a lot of color separation for print, like offset printing, at a print shop or something, then CMYK becomes important. But otherwise, if you're processing your color digital images, the CMYK is going to become a non-factor. Now, gray, you want to change this to gray gamma 2.2. The black and whites will look much, much better. Your print results will be a lot better because the appearance on your computer screen will be a lot better. And just trust me when I tell you, gray gamma 2.2 is where you want to be. The spot dot gain of 20% is pretty standard. Now down here is another area you need to pretty much pay attention to. Now notice both working spaces and color management policies both have an RGB setting. Now you would think these would collide, but they actually don't. Now here's your choices. You can turn this off, which you never want to do. Or you can convert to the working RGB, which is also something that we heartily recommend that you not do because it doesn't do you any good. Now, let's look at an example. Let's say you've got grandma's point and shoot. She took a picture of the grandchildren at Christmas and wants you to blow it up at an 8x10 to print it. That's a very common scenario. That point and shoot photograph is coming to you in the sRGB color space as a JPEG. I guarantee it. So Pro Photo RGB isn't going to do you any good, but neither is it going to do any harm. So your working space is always going to be in Pro Photo RGB, but when you import an image to do processing on it, you want to preserve the embedded profile, which in most cases is going to be sRGB. Now, in the old days, back before I really had a full understanding of this topic of color spaces, I used to do everything in Adobe RGB, and then I learned that that's not the best. The best is Pro Photo RGB. Now, all this talk between sRGB and Adobe RGB and Pro Photo RGB, if this is all a mystery to you, let me direct you to a tutorial that will be in this series called Color Spaces Explained. You'll do yourself a big favor by watching that video, that tutorial, to gain a full understanding of what all this discussion about color spaces is all about. If you already understand it, more power to you. Just don't change this preserve embedded profiles. Same thing for CMYK and same thing for gray. Just let the embedded profiles do their thing. Now, let's say you're shooting RAW, as you should, and you go to process your RAW images with DxO Photolab, as you should. You're going to export those in the Pro Photo RGB color space. In fact, if you're using Lightroom, the default export color space is Pro Photo RGB for a good reason. So always set this at Pro Photo, always set this at Preserve Embedded Profiles. Now, one of the things that I like is that you'll get a prompt if there's a mismatch. I like having this profile mismatch question come up whenever I open an image because it forces me to think about what I'm getting ready to do. Now, I'm going to warn you about one thing. When you get updates, now don't ask me why, I don't know why, but when you get updates to Photoshop and you install those updates, many times these will revert back to their default settings. And you'll be doing yourself a favor that every time you do an update off the Adobe Creative Cloud, then go back and make sure these color settings are where they should be. Now, this stuff over here, I'm going to be dead honest with you, I don't even understand what it means, okay? This relative colorimetric. I've seen it a million times. I just have never taken the time to learn this. I just have never had to, so I'm one to not add work to my already hectic workload, so I just leave things as they are and everything works great. Use black point compensation. You want all three of these checked and just leave these in their default settings and you'll be good to go. But the most important thing to remember is ProPhoto RGB color space as your working space, and Gray Gamma 2.2, and down here on all three of these choices, preserve embedded profiles. And then you'll have it nailed down for the highest quality image that your camera can generate when you do your work in Photoshop.